Hi there, this is Sorcerer from Sorcerer Films, and welcome to a video I'm going to call Turkey Love. And I'm going to talk about The Sword and the Sorcerer from 1982. Now obviously, all 3,987 films that I have in my collection are all masterpieces. But some of them people view as perhaps not that good. But I'm going to give some Turkey love. It sounds like a Frank Zappa album. This is the Scream Factory 4K and Blu-ray edition. Now, as you may know, I'm not 4K ready. I might be at some point, because they keep releasing things like Taking a Pelham 123 in 4K. I might get there eventually, but obviously this has a Blu-ray as well, which is more important for me, as I just had it on a not very good DVD print. Now, this is a film that has been in my life since I saw it in VHS. Look at that original artwork. That's lovely. And objectively, it might not be the greatest film ever made, but that's why I'm giving it Turkey Love. I'll get to the extras on this Scream Factory edition, which are both amazing and disturbing and tragic at the same time. It was written and directed by Pyun, who grew up in Hawaii and was kind of an outsider in Hollywood and never really played the Hollywood game. He's famous for doing lots of fantasy and sci-fi things like Nemesis series of films and Cyborg sequels and things like that. But again, I'll get to the extras after I've talked about the film. So this film was kind of made in the sweet spot after John Boorman's Excalibur had come out and was a big hit. Conan the Barbarian with Schwarzenegger was in production, so Pyun managed to get this film greenlit in between those two. It came out 4 weeks before Conan did, and you actually kind of forget, looking back, it did make like $6 million in its first 10 days, which obviously back in those days was pretty significant. But it's a film that could have been a little bit different. It stars, because of the budget, I think it was only like $1.5 million or something like that. They got quite a lot of TV actors like Kathleen Beller, who was in Dynasty, Lee Horsley, Simon McCorkindale, I think this was before Manimal, Richard Lynch, who apparently was on cocaine for most of the shoot. But originally they were going to go with David Hasselhoff as the lead, which would have been a completely different film. And also they'd arranged for Oliver Reed to do the voiceover prologue that Simon McCorkindale ends up doing. But apparently Oliver Reed was so drunk when he came in and was mispronouncing everything, they were never actually going to use it, which is again where Oliver Reed was in 1982. So the film itself is a kind of R-rated, and again, remember as a young boy getting it out in the video shop, it had demons and gore and lots of nudity. Again, we'll get to that in the extras. We start off with this really atmospheric scene as Titus Cromwell, played by Richard Lynch, is taking this witch to bring forth the demon Zusha back from hell, and there's a wonderful seen in a cave in this crypt of souls, that when the witch is doing her incantation, all the heads on the crypt come to life and start bleeding. And really, on the Blu-ray print, also I don't know what it's like in 4K, but maybe one day I'll find out. But in Blu-ray, it really looks good, because again on the DVD it was really murky and you couldn't really see what was going on, apart from something disgusting. And they bring forth Zusha, played by Richard Mall, who had terrible problems with the contact lenses in his eyes, but we'll get to them in the extras. And he shows his power by disemboweling the witch with his hand. He's got very powerful fingertips. So he helps Richard Lynch, Cromwell, get the kingdom, the richest kingdom in the world that he's sought after, whose head is King Richard, played by an actor who looks very much like Christopher Plummer. So he kills Richard and the Queen, but the son, Talon, I mean the film at one point was going to be called Talon, at one point it was going to be called Cold Steel, but it finished with The Sword and the Sorcerer, obviously. The son escapes even though he's maimed, and he takes his father's sword, which has 3 blades, 2 of which he can fire at people, which again, as a young boy watching that was super cool. How they get the blades back in after you've fired it through somebody's head, they never kind of go into that detail. So we go to years later, and Prince Micah, who, when people shout, they're doing a rebellion against Cromwell and they say it's for Micah, it sounds like they're talking about plastic. Played by Simon McCorkindale, and his sister, played by Kathleen Beller. They're trying to take the crown back, where they rightfully belong. And Lee Horsley is the head of a bunch of swashbucklers, adventurers, and daring do, and he gets involved. Simon McCorkindale gets captured by Cromwell, and Kathleen Beller pretty much offers a night in bed with her if he rescues her brother from Cromwell's castle, and all manner of hijinks ensue. There's a nice people being eaten by rats, because for some reason they go in to kind of take the castle in the basement, but for some reason they bring along a really old man who obviously gets left at the end and left behind, and he gets eaten by rats because he can't go any further. Why you would take an old man into a castle siege, I'm not quite sure. There's kind of, like I say, there's a harem scene with lots of topless women. We'll get to that in the extras. There's people getting their tongues cut out. There's a nice scene of somebody's head in a grinding wheel. So they wanted to make it an R-rated film. It's clunky. It's cheesy. Pyun does his best, but I always like the intro to Zusha and the end, because Cromwell, who thinks he's got rid of Zusha, again we'll get to that in the extras, he's always on the lookout for Zusha to get his revenge because he double crossed him. But of course you can pretty much figure out who Zusha is. The only person that can't figure out who Zusha is Cromwell himself, even though it's fairly obvious who Zusha is. It's just a wonderfully daft, cheesy film. Personally, I've always had a soft spot for it. That's why I'm giving it Turkey Love. I would much rather watch this than Conan the Barbarian personally. Um, Obviously, I'd much rather watch Excalibur than this, but that's a different story. Um, but really, the reason that perhaps it does deserve a bit more credit than it actually gets is if you do watch the extras. Um, it's a 4K scan, strangely enough, because it's a 4K disc. But on the Blu-ray, it's a 4K scan. There's a new commentary with Albert Pyun, and there's an interview with the director himself, where you really get an idea of what he was up against. You know, he was in his early 20s at the time when he made this. This was his first film. And the producer, who isn't on this disc, but does come across as one of those scumbag producers, you know, in the harem scene that I mentioned, he pretty much brought in a group of women and told the director, tell them to get their clothes off. Um, and he was like, do they know they're getting their clothes off? And he's like, no, but you just tell them to get their clothes off. Um, the producer pretty much made the first AD in charge. So, as members of the cast would say, the director would say, okay, we're doing this now. And then the AD would just come in and go, no, we're not, we're doing this. So he was kind of undermined. He wasn't allowed anything to do with the editing of the film. Um, it's just when you actually hear about the background of a film, sometimes you can realise why the film doesn't work perhaps completely. I mean, for the budget they were on, I think they do a really good job. The production design is really good. The effects are really good. Um, Obviously, there's some matte work that obviously Blu-ray and 4K does expose a bit more. Um, but you do really feel for Pyun when he's talking, because he pretty much had no control. I mean, they threatened to fire him at one point, or tried to get him fired, because the AD was pretty much in charge of the shoot, and the editor, you know, Pyun had nothing to do with the editing, had nothing to do with the music. Um, Even though it was his script, it was his vision. You know, there's a scene near the end of the film where they have like 50 stuntmen involved, you know, and it's a big scene for such a low budget film. Um, and you do actually, you know, during the interview, he said he's struggling with dementia now, and you do actually feel for the guy. Um, and you know, the Nemesis films, apart from the first one, which is kind of fun, you know, they're not that good. You know, he's done a lot of sequels, but you do kind of understand where he's coming from when he talks about he never really was in the Hollywood game. He never liked going for lunches. You know, he never, you know, he perhaps was his own worst enemy, but he just didn't play the game. And you really feel sorry for him. Or not sorry for him, but you do feel empathy for him when he actually talks about the making of the film and how he pretty much was undermined constantly. But he just had to try and get through it. You know, at one point he was going to quit, and Lee Horsley kind of told him to kind of, you know, this is your first job, so you can't really quit. If they fire you, then that's a different story. But you know, you've got to stay for us, and you've got to stay for the film. You know, it's your vision. You just have to try and do the best you can. So those kind of stories do kind of make you, you know, feel for people, and you get a kind of much better and fuller picture of the film and its making. There's an interview with Kathleen Beller, who she had come from soap operas. She talks about, you know, her nude scene, which is her basically lying down getting a massage and Lee Horsley bursts in. But she talks about there was a body double who they obviously hadn't talked about. They wanted her to run around nude in the scene, and they hadn't told her that, and they were trying to force her. The producers were trying to force her to do that, and Kathleen Beller was like, if they force you to do that, I'm going to tell them I'm going to walk off the film. So the producers do not come across as being very nice people, because obviously they were just worried about their money, even though they paid Pyun and his friends very little to actually make the film, and they took the profits away because obviously it did well in home video as well. Um, there's an interview with co-writer and co-producer John Stuckmeyer, who was friends with Pyun. There's an interview with the editor Marshall Harvey, which is kind of interesting because obviously he was kind of, well, not friends, but he had worked for the producer, so that's why the producer used him, because again, usually directors pick their editor. And again, so he edited the film without Pyun's input. Um, and again, he doesn't come across that well. He actually, there's a Trailers for Hell feature on it as well, and he does that, and all he does is really kind of shit on the film, and it's like not that professional, really. Um, so he doesn't come across that well. There's an interview with makeup effects Alan Apone and also, I can't remember the name, but the brothers who did Killer Clowns from Outer Space. They did the Crypt of Souls, which is, to me, is one of the standout moments. It's got a great intro, and they did the Crypt of Souls, so they talk about that. Um, and there's one more extra that is quite um, moving and sad. It's actually a tribute um, to a stuntman on the film who actually died during the making of the film, and it's when Zusha, the demon or sorcerer, is double crossed by Cromwell and stabbed and thrown off a cliff. That was an 80-foot jump, and he missed the mat at the bottom. And it's obviously in the film, so when you actually watch Zusha fly off the cliff, you know that unlike Zusha, who's not dead and comes back in disguise, the stuntman did actually die because he missed the bag at the bottom. Obviously, there's different people, everybody talking about what happened and how it could have happened. There's an argument that it was loose gravel, so he didn't get the leap right. Because he was wearing Zusha's robes, he maybe got caught in the robe, so again, he didn't get the right distance. Apparently, he did the same jump off the same cliff a couple of years ago in a TV movie with Peter O'Toole. Not Masala, similar to that. Apparently he did a similar jump in Mexico a couple of weeks earlier, and he almost missed the bag on the far end. So maybe that was part of it. It's tragic anyway. And they went back and forth, but they decided, with the family's permission, to leave the shot in. So when you see Zusha go off the cliff, you're literally seeing somebody die, which again puts it into kind of perspective and gives you another different feelings when you're actually watching that shot. So all in all, the extras really give you a different perspective. I haven't listened to the commentary by Pyun, sorry, I've changed his pronunciation of his name about 10 times during this video. But I think with this 4K release, Blu-ray release, the Sorcerer and Sorcerer does deserve a bit more turkey love. It's not perfect, it's cheesy, it's daft, but for the money they made it for and the conditions that they made it in, I'll always have a soft spot for it. And that's what turkey love's all about. having a soft spot for a film that perhaps lots of other people don't like. So thanks very much for watching this episode of Turkey Love. Obviously, I'm not sure I'll be having too many more episodes, because all the films I have in my collection are amazing. Answers in a postcard. So thanks very much for watching. This is Solitude Roan from Solitude Roan Films, saying farewell.